Welcome, Wargamers, to the dangerous reaches of the mortal realms as we explore yet another epic tale of war and heroism. This time between the Kharadron Overlords and the Gloomspite GItz. And spoiler alert here, this is a story that begs to be turned into a little mini campaign. It's got everything from an action movie. It's just like set in the mortal realms. And so let's get into our tale. It's pulled from the Kharadron Overlords battle tome, and it's called The Battle of Scrappa Spill. The largest armada ever assembled by Barak Zahn descends upon the green-skinned kingdom of Scrappa Spill. The admirals of the Skyport believe that beneath the junk mountains of Ayada lies the Zangmadron, a Kharadron dreadnought carrying experimental weaponry that was brought down during the Age of Chaos. Squadrons of frigates swoop down from the ochre clouds of the Spill, pummeling Grots and Oryx with broadsides as Archanaut excavation teams leap overboard and into the fray. At first, the battle seems to sway in the Kharadron's favor. The wreckage of the Zangmadron is located, but before the Barak Zahn fleet can fully extract its cargo, the Bad Moon rises above Ayada and begins to spit Lunestone meteors at the air fleet. Several vessels are smashed out of the sky to crash upon the rusty dunes of the Spill. The Barak Zahn armada is forced to retreat with the few artifacts it has recovered. Its Grunstock Thunderers suffer dreadful losses, holding the Greenskin tide at bay long enough for the survivors of downed vessels to be evacuated. Okay, so in my opinion, a bit of context is needed to fully understand the gravity of the story that I just read to you. So at first glance, it seems very straightforward, right? There's a record of a ship going missing during the Age of Chaos, and through whatever means, the Kharadron Overlords have decided that it's likely in this greenskin territory. Pretty straightforward, smash in, grab the loot, and get out, right? So why bring, and I quote, the largest armada ever assembled by Barak Zahn? Well, that's because this isn't just a greenskin fort. Scrappa Spill is the home and kingdom of the largest Gloomspite GItz enclave, led by the savage and ruthless Skagrot the Loon King. It's in Chaman, the realm of metal, and it is a fortress of sorts, yes, but in practical terms, it's also just a mountain or a small range of mountains formed of scrap metal that the GItz have found over the centuries. It's an artificial landscape feature that is massive in size and scale, and how they ascertained, the lost ship's location is beyond me, but I also wanted to point it out that they're not just like kicking a hornet's nest, right? It's bigger than that. Thousands to 1 odds. Also, you heard me mention a place called Ayada. That's just kind of like the area around it, where Scrappa Spill is located. So that's like, the literal stage of like the location and stuff, but the actual military action itself is nuts and goes back and forth like every awesome battle scene does. Descending from the thick, polluted clouds above Scrappa Spill, like they were literally called ochre clouds, Barak Zahn fleet bombards the snot out of that place. Now, given the design of the KO ships, I imagine in my mind, it's like flying concentric rings where they have the guns on the side just all kind of pointed down at the ground, and just like a hurricane made of gun trying to clear out a landing spot for the Archanaut. Soon after, troops are jumping overboard of these ships, just like, SEAL Team 6 of Duarden step into the most hostile territory ever. And at first, everything is turning up Kharadron Overlords, right? They find the ship, it's loaded to the gills with guns still, which means obviously they haven't messed with it too much, and they start trying to recover it. And I imagine, just based on what we know about Grots, what likely happened is that the initial barrage scared the hell out of them, and while hundreds may have died, everyone else just kind of scattered. But Grots have this tendency to scatter and then reform very, very quickly and come back stronger for an attack. That is to say, as Grot warbands and groups kind of retreat, they get absorbed into larger big ones, and boom, near instantly, there's this army sitting right there. It's just whatever loon boss has the most charisma, the most personality to bring under his heel, that kind of stuff, all of a sudden you can very realistically have an army formed very quickly amongst Grots. My point is, I bet there was a time when things were were really quiet, right? The KO like are hooking up all the rigging to the salvage of the ship, and it's like that perfect horror movie scene where it's like, it's quiet, too quiet. And it's at this point that the winds change direction. The sky darkens, the ground seems to come alive with activity as small growths begin popping up. Mushrooms and other fungal growths seep up from the earth because the bad moon has come. Now, if you're not familiar with the bad moon, I'll make it real brief here. It is a celestial body that is the source of worship of the Gloomspite GItz. They see it as a blessing and sign, or even an avatar of their god, Gorka Morka. And when this thing hands in the sky, your world becomes a living horror film, right? It gets dark, there's this sickly green glow. As I mentioned before, the earth erupts with sickly life in the forms of, slimy mushrooms and other exotic flora. And people just straight up go insane, right? Maddened by the presence of the bad moon. And very importantly to our story, little bits of the bad moon splinter off. You see, for the Gloomspite GItz, life is about using whatever natural resources they can get a hold of, which is why so many of their units use and reference mushrooms, hallucinogenic or otherwise, because it's kind of the prime flora in their chosen environment, which is caves. Makes perfect sense. Well, when the bad moon appears, it gives the green-skinned children their most prized resource, Loonstone. It's just like little bits of the meteor kind of splinter off and land on the ground. Nothing too big or grandiose in normal circumstances. But you have this armada in the sky, right? You have, stunty SEAL Team 6 on the ground trying to get the prize, and boom, all hell breaks loose. Loonstone meteors rocket from the sky and, in a twist of irony, bombard the KO fleet with attacks from above. Several ships straight up explode. My mind goes to the image of the movie, I don't know if you remember this from forever ago, Armageddon, right? Just massive fire trails of meteors just punching straight through anything they touch. And at this point, the quick smash and grab job they had planned becomes a situation where it's possible that dang near most of the Skyport's military is wiped out. Again, the largest armada that they've ever formed. Their leaders sound the retreat and evacuation begins. Now, the Kharadron Overlords have recovered some amount of the technology, but not all of it by a long shot. They've suffered incredible losses in the form of Gruntstock Thunderers specifically, and keep in mind, these are the heavy weapon guys, right? The notion that I get from the story is that the Gruntstock Thunderers were out keeping the hordes of Grots at bay during the attempted recovery of technology, but also, as it points out, when ships got downed, any surviving crew, they needed some kind of defensive action to give them a chance to get rescued. Now, here's really why I wanted to talk about this and why I think this tale is so cool. You have two very different perspectives here, and they're different from the kind of storytelling that we usually get, okay? So on the Kharadron Overlord side, it's a massive tactical military endeavor, right? An epic tale of recovering that which was lost to us and valiant and bold tactics. And like I said, it's an action movie. Like, if this was a bank heist, right, that happened in the real world and no one got killed, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? Let him keep it, right? That's hella impressive, absolutely. It's just this crazy orchestration of ships and lots of moving parts and, I don't know, just doing things very, very quickly. But while it's happening, things go immediately from amazing to, dear God, I'm blind because there's mushrooms growing out of my eyes. There's up to thousands of grots around me, all trying to kill me. We need to leave. And all of a sudden, that technology doesn't seem quite so worth it. And while it does say that some of the technology was recovered, I am personally just going to say this is a straight up loss. Right? I don't care how you try to spin it. The experimental stuff was just sitting there in a scrap heap. It's not like they couldn't let it fall into enemy hands, right? There was no urgency to this. It's been there just chilling since the Age of Chaos when they lost the ship. Then, when they go to Scrappa Spill to try and recover the thing, the Loonstone is taking out Kharadron Overlord ships that are still functional, which means all you've really done is add to the pile of scrap that is Scrappa Spill, and brought attention to the fact that there's a boat full of guns sitting right there that they probably didn't know about. Again, it's been sitting there since the Age of Chaos. And they lost many, many soldiers, but on the flip side, it's like, whose fault is this, right? What a weird conversation has to happen amongst Kharadron Overlord leaders after the fact of like, sorry I failed you, but honestly, how was I supposed to know that a rogue celestial object that's worshipped as deity would pop up and turn this place into a hellscape? You know what I mean? Like, at every level, this was an unsatisfactory venture for the Kharadron Overlords. But then, to me, the more fun part is thinking about the other side of this, because technically, these grots are the innocent ones who got invaded, right? They're just chilling at home, cracking open cold ones with the boys, and then immediately, without warning, are getting blasted apart from the sky, not because of anything you necessarily did. Again, the ship's just in a pile somewhere. We have no evidence to think that they were, like, trying to use the weapons or anything. There's just a piece of junk nearby that somebody else wants. And so, like, pure pandemonium ensues. The icon of your god shows up. It's just like, imagine like literally if God just like peeled the clouds back. It was like, hey, coming in like the Kool-Aid man, blowing up ships from the sky. And I just imagine myself as like one of those grots just kind of standing there watching all this happen and just being like, what the hell is going on? But super quickly, it's all over, right? The KO are gone. They left a couple of ships, which was kind, I guess. And there's mushrooms and moonstone all over the place. So yay, I guess. I don't know. Weird day. Like, what a roller coaster of emotions that had to have been for like every grot in that little area. That was just hilarious to me. I want a Black Library book that paints the Gloomspite GItz as the heroes being attacked, right? Just kind of like reskin that terrible Pearl Harbor movie, but it's like all grots trying to figure out what the heck's going on, and then like Morgan Freeman as the Bad Moon comes in and scares away all the planes. That's my in real life retelling of this story, But it's just bad acting everywhere. Everyone's like freaking out. It's like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, this deity level thing that you're trying to worship just pops up out of nowhere when things are really crazy. It's just like, what next? What now? But getting back to kind of why I started this video, the real core of why I like is that it's perfect for a campaign, because to me, a good little mini campaign is breaking down a story into multiple sections and then playing those out. So for example, the aerial assault, maybe if it's between a KO and Gloomspite GItz player, the KO guy brings all ships the first game, regardless of battle line and that kind of stuff, just thematically brings all ships, and he's trying to annihilate the enemy. The second one would be hold out as long as you can, which would be maybe the Kharadron Overlords being attacked by waves and waves and waves of GItz. And then the third one is just retreat, of just whatever, however you want to simulate the Kharadron Overlords trying to leave the battlefield. It's the perfect format. It's a nice little 3-part play, and it summarizes one coherent story. Anyway, I thought it was just very entertaining to think about, the warden just hopping over the side of the ship, rappelling in, and then all of a sudden the grots just having what was otherwise a normal day until like they got obliterated and then God showed up, mix of emotion. I'm going to call it 6 in one, half a dozen the other, with good and bad there. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope to catch you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.